I went to MIT to study electrical engineering in 1964. I had some very good teachers. Dr. Bose of Bose, my teacher in electrical engineering and acoustics. I had good luck with a professor named Barry Blesser. He was one of the pivotal figures in starting out digitized audio. His first product was the EMT, great big reverb thing that has like a gear shift knob on it. He was also the guy who ran the MIT radio station. And I ended up with a little show called the Electric Chair. And I think our most powerful effect on people was that we could make people turn off all their radios. Dealing with both the acoustics and the electronics of a recording studio and a radio station was also one of the pivotal starting factors for my getting interested. I actually quit school and never finished my bachelor. One of my fraternity brothers, who was in a very bizarre state, was wandering down the streets in Cambridge, ran into this Chinese fellow who decided that my friend, his name was Mitchell Swartz, that there was a potential for many kind of inventions. That's when they set up and financed a kind of think tank type of operation, at which point we collaborated and made a synthesizer with a digital controlled oscillator and a ring modulator and 4 filters which could be activated by the envelope generators in the synthesizer. At that point, we had the first prototype. There was one of those little events in society called the stock market crash. So our benefactors stopped being interested in benefacting us. What we ended up doing was to shop around until we actually found somebody who could buy and finance the synthesizer idea. That was Al Dronge, who was at that time the president of Guild Musical Instruments. So we embarked on that project, and it resulted in the prototypes that you see. We were well into production engineering for the synthesizer. We had already shown it to small audiences away from the NAMM show in Chicago. I flew in a double-engine plane with the president of Guild, who went to sleep during the flight, put it on autopilot, and did the most frightening landing in the midst of thunderstorms that I ever experienced in an airplane. Guild was into pedals to some extent. I think they had a wah pedal and some other things. And Aaron Newman was the manager of the electronic department. One beautiful spring day, I came into the office and phone rings. It's Aaron on the phone. Al Dronge has been killed in an airplane crash. That was the end of Al Dronge, and that was also the beginning of the end of the synthesizer project. Shortly thereafter, they told us that they were canceling the project, and once again, we were out on the street pretty much. Aaron, who still had a job in the electronics section of Guild, saw the beginning of the end for himself too. We started to talk about taking some parts of the synthesizer and seeing if we could squeeze them into a pedal that was affordable. Mostly the candidates from the synthesizer were either a ring modulator or using the filters. And at that time, we had a prototype which also had an envelope follower. The decision was to use the envelope follower, voltage-controlled filter, and a preamp to make a new kind of musical effect. That's what we eventually packaged as the Mu-Tron III. I think the first name for it was Auto-Wah. So with some investment from a music store owner, Sturf Nolde, and a little bit of chipping in by Aaron, and a guitar player named Danny Lamb were the Fabulous Four of the Mu-Tron company. Somebody thought of a contraction of the name Mu-Tronix, and the name Mu-Tron was born. The first uses of the Mu-Tron III were pretty much what I did expect. I knew what the thing could do, but the kind of creativity that followed.
Soldiers, keep on marching.
The thing that put us so-called on the map was Stevie Wonder's recording of Higher Ground. Not too long after that, Stevie Wonder showed up at Mu-Tronix, which was a converted chicken coop at a little place in rural New Jersey. He came, talked to us all, played some music, and we talked about other products. He agreed to do a poster for us. That was the one pivotal event of all of the uses that established us as a company. Then there was a whole bunch of big name artists that adopted it, and we were doing pretty well. Only trouble was we were a one product company. About that time, the phase shifters started becoming popular, and MXR's little Phase 90 was a very popular product. We decided to go after phasers. The engineering part of me was always interested in whatever new technology was coming out. The next adventure, we called it a phase-synthesizer. It made use of a bucket brigade analog delay, which at that time was a very difficult component to get along with. And so we came up with something which had pedal control, low frequency oscillator control, noise, and many different combinations of how to manipulate this one signal processing element. It was very difficult for me to limit the number of knobs to put on a pedal. As we were beginning to find out, our market had a difficulty with more knobs at that time. We knew that this particular bucket brigade wasn't going to do it. That's when we decided to use a transconductance amplifier, which was also a pretty new integrated circuit component, to expand the dynamic range over the conventionally used FET field effect transistor that was mostly used in the phase shifters at the time. We realized that there was a lot of competition and that we had to do something pretty special. It was Aaron Newman who had the idea, well, what if we made a double phaser? A phase 2, which was essentially a precursor to the biphase. It took us a very long time to come out with the biphase. And one of the reasons was that even though we had such great dynamic range and phasers were perfectly undistorted, everything was beautiful, except it didn't sound so great. That's when Aaron called in Bob Moog to help us. We did a bunch of measurements on the MXR phaser and our phaser. What we realized was that the lack of distortion was causing us to not have a very interesting kind of sound. I'm not sure when I came up with using a feedback loop around the phase shift stages, but that's what we did. It emphasized the phase. It did not distort the signal, but it added back the sound quality that was missing. So that's where the extra knob came from, the feedback knob. Along with the biphase, we wanted to have a number of different control sources for the phaser 2, which led to us developing our pedal. You could probably run over it with a truck. It had First of all, the mechanism itself used a very strong spring and a kind of a Del ring pivot so that it would last pretty much forever. And also it was electro-optical. At some point around 1977, and we had been working on different products. We also, at that time, had brought in Dan Armstrong and George Merriman to make the Armstrong boxes as a lower priced product line, and the Mu-Tron octave divider. We ended up with a venture capitalist company that wanted a seat on the board of directors. The board of directors was us four founders to begin with. We also started to accrue different kinds of advisors for marketing, business, and accounting, and stuff like that. And none of these people were native to the music business. Kevin Godley and Lal Creme from 10cc showed up at Musitronics and demonstrated this awesome invention they called the gizmo. Something that you mounted to the guitar. It had little wheels with little teeth on them, simulated a bowing effect to the guitar. Everybody fell in love with the product immediately. We made an agreement with them, and I was tasked to come up with the production version. It was mainly a mechanical device, so we needed a mechanical engineer. It was dauntingly difficult to make it work. In fact, it never really worked. Towards the end, when it was decided that we would pretty much abandon Musitronics and go into the Gizmo, which became named Gizmotron. It was the pivot point of the end of Musitronics. So right at the beginning of 1978, I decided to leave Musitronics alone. I did a little work as a consultant on the Gizmotron. I kind of knew that that couldn't be done right, at least with the technology at the time. It was decided to sell the Mu-Tron company. There were two offers for the Mu-Tron company. One was Sid Hack and Univox, and the other was ARP. It appeared that ARP offered a better deal. ARP had gone public and bought a new big building. Were coming out with their Avatar guitar synthesizer. Nobody really quite understood that ARP would very soon go bankrupt. So although they put out a couple of Musitronics product, or at least they put out an ARP Mu-Tron III, and they were busy developing the other products, they never saw the market. Once upon a time, went to one of the NAMM shows just out of curiosity. Visited various booths and met Mike Matthews, who at that time was making Russian Sovtek stuff and importing tubes. We had been arch competitors at one point, or at least I felt like he was an arch competitor. I don't know if he felt that I was an arch competitor. A year went by, and I got a call from him. It's like, hey, well, we'd like to make a Mu-Tron for Electro-Harmonix. I sure would. The first product was the Q-Tron, which I designed as best I could, a Mu-Tron III with all of its advantages and a couple other advantages into Electro-Harmonix package. I ended up doing quite a number of product designs, mostly in envelope control filters and phasers for Mike Matthews, which he came out with over the years. I saw in the used equipment ads that the Mu-Trons were getting a whole lot of money. And I said, well, if they're paying so much money for that and I can make something that's so much better, why don't I get back in the business? Around 2014, there was some guy who came up and wanted to, just to buy a Mu-Tron. And this guy was a performing musician and very smart. And I said, well, let me see if I can get him involved in the company. This was Rand Anderson. Rand really helped me with the development and the marketing and the demonstration of these products Rand actually advanced money to produce a little one of these things with the Mu-Tron name, and the new Mu-Tron company is born. He's doing it in a style that is appropriate to the present time. In the early days, the size of the product was of no consequence. In some cases, the bigger the better. And in present day, I think it's the function of the pedal rather than the package that makes the most difference. The interchangeability of effects and packages on a pedal board is something that wasn't conceived of in the 70s. You couldn't get to the kind of complexity of signal processing at that time, nor could you fit the products in a compact base and be able to use them. It's important to make things that people can use and afford and be really performance-oriented devices. That is the direction for the new Mu-Tron.